Hey guys, my name is Melissa and I'm a volunteer for CDH International. I'm also the leader of the Awareness Committee and I'm also on CPAP. And I'm also the mother of Allison, who is a CDH survivor. And I want to talk a little bit about her story. We didn't know what CDH was from the get-go. Never heard of it until our 21-week anatomy scan. When we went to find out that we were having a little girl, we were excited. Just over the moon. Well, during the ultrasound, I noticed that the ultrasound tech kept taking a long time and I didn't understand why. Even though this was my first pregnancy, I just felt like it was strange. And during my whole entire pregnancy, I felt like something wasn't right. And that was confirmed when we were sent back into the room. My OBGYN came in and he informed us that Allie had a congenital diaphragmatic hernia on the left side. And we were devastated because we didn't know what this birth defect was, never heard of it, didn't have a clue, didn't know what the odds were going to be for our child. But my OBGYN was amazing, and he sent us to where we needed to be, just all throughout the journey. And our first stop on our journey was to see an ultrasound tech specialist in one of our neighboring towns that's about 45 minutes away. And they did confirm that Allie did have left-sided CDH, and at the time, it was only her stomach that was in her chest cavity. And within a month, we had anatomy scans at least once every other week, sometimes weekly, especially after finding out about a month later that her case went from mild to severe because her intestines had ended up moving into her chest and along with part of her liver. And it took them a little bit to figure that out because they weren't for sure if it was one of her kidneys or if it was in fact her liver that moved into her chest. And it was in fact part of her liver. So our plans went from having a healthy baby in our hometown at the hospital I was born at, then it ended up we was going to have her in Johnson City, and then we got through a loop again, and it was decided that the best care that she could possibly get would be at Vanderbilt, which is in Nashville, which is 4 hours away from us. And that was nerve-wracking to say the least. And we went to our first appointment up there. We were there all day long between looking over paperwork, signing paperwork, meeting with my third, technically, OBGYN and third ultrasound specialist. So throughout my whole entire pregnancy, I had 3 OBGYNs, 3 ultrasound techs, and we also met with the NICU team and the surgeons who were going to be over basically saving Allie's life. And they wanted us to stay up there a month ahead of time before she was supposed to be born, just in case she came early, because they told us flat out that if she was to be born anywhere else but there, basically if she was to be born in our hometown, she would have to be flown by helicopter to them and that she would not make it. So that was very nerve-wracking. That didn't help me any either. Being a first-time mom, finding out that I was having a little girl like I wanted to, and then just being told that we don't know how she's going to do. We don't know if she's going to make it. Like I said, she went from being a mild case to severe within a month time span. And we didn't get to be able to stay up there a month ahead of time, but we were up there a week prior to her being born. I had appointments all that week. And during one of my appointments, they had noticed that I was losing fluid, and we thought we was going to have to end up having her a couple days ahead of time. Thankfully, we didn't, because I didn't end up losing any more fluid. So I went in on March 1st to be induced that night. And they did what I call a practice round of labor, because they wanted to see how me and Allie both were going to be able to handle it. And I remember several times being uncomfortable and needing to get up to go to the bathroom. I would throw my husband was like, you need me, just holler, I will help you. I had to throw a pillow at this man, and I ended up getting up by myself just to go pee. So I tried to find a little bit of, I guess, humor or something to kind of keep me at ease, which didn't end up lasting long. So during my practice rounds, they had noticed that Allie's heart rate would drop whenever I'd have, I guess, a practice contraction. I'm not 100% sure what they technically call all that. So about midnight that night, they let me rest, and her too. Then at a little after 7 the next morning, they started full-blown labor. And after 8 hours of labor, I wasn't progressing with dilating. Allie wasn't handling my contractions well, because every time I'd have a contraction, her heart rate would drop really low, and it would slowly build back up, but it seemed like by the time that it would build back up, I would have another contraction, then her heart rate would just go down again. So it's about 4 o'clock, they decided they were going to give me some oxygen for about 20 or 30 minutes to see if that would help her. It wasn't even 10 minutes later, my OBGYN for Nashville came in. He said we had to get her out now. So that meant I was going to have a C-section, which, once again, wasn't planned. Terrifying. But they came in, gave me an epidural. And this is another one of those humors I tried to keep in it, which is not that funny. It was kind of scary. But they were training a nurse on how to put an epidural in. This was her first time doing it, and they basically had the how-to book just sitting right there on how to do it. And I'm just like thinking, this is not exactly the time to be practicing on someone. So she did great. Everything was good. Wasn't painful. So they got me ready to go down to the OR. And we were told before Allie was born that we wouldn't get to hear her cry from where everything was in the left side of her chest. And I was shaking like crazy. I was terrified. And during my C-section, I couldn't wear my contacts or glasses, and I'm blind as a bat. But at 4:47 p.m. on March the 2nd of 2015, Allie came into the world, and we got to hear her cry. Not once, but twice. It was little. It almost kind of reminded me of a newborn kitten crying. And it just felt like the whole entire world stopped. I remembered I had stopped shaking, and it was just magical, and it was like just a miracle that we got to hear her. And just something in me, it told me that she was going to make it through this. And they did end up intubating her right after birth. And as they were wheeling her out, I had one nurse who was amazing the whole time I was there helping me, and she asked me, she said, did they let you see her? And I said no, which not like I could really see anyway, but they stopped right at the door for a split second. I remember one of the first things I asked was, is she bald? That was not good timing, and that is not what I should have been worried about, but that was just the first thing that came to my mind and out of my mouth. But I did get to see a very blurry, tiny human in this incubator, at least somewhat, before she went out the door. And it was about 4 hours later that I actually got to go see her in the NICU, which I was in the main part of Vanderbilt, and she was in the children's hospital part in the NICU. So it seemed like it was 10 miles just to go see her, and we had to go through the back way that the doctors and nurses take to get to where they need to go, I guess, discreetly or quicker. And it was hard because I was having to be wheeled back there. I couldn't walk, a long distance like that. And just seeing her for the first time, it was amazing. And it was scary because she was just hooked up to so many medicines. You know, she had an IV in her belly button. She had one in her hand. Actually, she had two, one in each hand. And that was before they was actually able to get a PICC line in her. And of course, she was intubated. She was hooked up to a ventilator. And it almost seemed like I kind of ignored all of that, but at the same time, I still realized it was there. But I was just more amazed that I have this baby now, that it was hard to believe that I was a mom, and this little tiny itty bitty baby girl that was 5 pounds and 1 ounce was mine. I was like, I can't believe that this tiny person used to live in my body, and she's here. And the first week was really touch and go with Allie. She was still in critical condition, and they were worried about her blood gases and her stats staying good, and they were having issues with that, so they had to hold off on her repair surgery. And it was scheduled. She was born on a Monday, and her repair surgery was supposed to be scheduled for that Friday, but her stats and everything just still weren't looking good, so they thought that maybe they could wait and see how Monday looked. Well, by Monday, her stats and her blood gases were looking better, but they were wanting to wait for an ECMO machine to be available just in case if she needed it. And they didn't have one yet. So the following Friday, 11 days after she was born, it was Friday the 13th, they informed us they were going to do her surgery. And I was like, great. Then I was like, oh God, the day's Friday the 13th. I was like, this is not a good day. And it just seemed like we were getting hit with just random things that just made me even more nervous. But they were supposed to come get her at 9 a.m. on Friday the 13th to do her surgery. They didn't end up coming and getting her until a little after 1. And during that time, I was actually at my post-op appointment with my OBGYN in Nashville to see how my C-section scar was looking, making sure everything was healing like it was supposed to. And he was asking how Allie was doing. I was like, well, right now she's in surgery. He said, oh no. He said, we need to get you out of here. So we hurried up and got out of the appointment, and we went to the waiting room. And we were initially told that her surgery would take about an hour or so. It ended up taking a little over 3 hours, but we were getting call updates from Dr. Danko. She's the one who actually performed Allie's CDH repair. And whenever it was all said and done, Dr. Danko ended up coming and getting us and taking us into a room and talking with us, telling us how the surgery went. And they did have to end up giving her 2 blood transfusions. Once when she was born. 2 whenever a couple days after she was born, and then once after the surgery because she did have some blood loss. And she told us that she did amazing with the surgery, that whenever she moved her abdominal organs out of her chest and back into her abdominal cavity, one thing they had to do is they had to take her appendix and put it behind her stomach because they just ran out of room. I mean, she was teeny tiny. But one thing that Dr. Danko was amazed with was that usually with some babies, it takes them a while for their lung to actually, inflate after the repair. And she said with Allie, as soon as she pulled everything out, that her lung just almost instantly inflated, which was great. But Allie's left lung, it's always going to be a little bit smaller, but it is going to grow as she does, but it's always going to be a little bit smaller than what it's supposed to be. So after her surgery, just trying to keep her comfortable, make sure she's okay. And during some time while she was in the NICU, she did have to get switched from one ventilator to another, and that thing was so loud, and they had to have these little yellow earmuffs on her ears, and she did not like them at all. But she did eventually get switched back to the original ventilator she was on, which was much more quiet. And we got to see her little eyes open, like fully after her surgery, and she was just so cute, but she just looked so helpless and like she was so tired. And I would just talk to her every day, and I'm just like, Allie, honey, I was like, you can do this. I was like, you're strong. Like, mommy and daddy's here. We're going to be here for you. And I remember times I would be up there basically by myself because my husband would have to come back to work. And I was staying at the Ronald McDonald house because I couldn't stay in the hospital with her until she got moved to step down. And I remember there was one day Allie was awake. She had her eyes open. And I was talking to her and I was telling her that mommy would have to leave for a little bit so she can go and eat and do a little bit of laundry. And it just tore me all to pieces because just the look in her eyes, she didn't understand anything that was going on. She didn't understand why she was probably in pain and why she had all these things hooked up to her. She didn't understand why, mommy couldn't pick her up and hold her. And just seeing the way she looked, it just tore me all to pieces, and I just broke down crying, and I was like, Allie, it's okay. I was like, mommy will be right back. But she just kept looking. She just had that elongated look like, please don't leave me. And like I said, I just broke down crying, and there was actually a housekeeper that came by. I can't remember her name, and I wish I could, because I wish I could just go find her and hug her, because she really helped me that day whenever I was feeling really down. And after that, there were several days where I would just break down and cry. I couldn't help it. Allie did start doing better, and whenever she was about 3 weeks old, she got to get an oxygen cannula and start breathing room air. And that was also the day that we got to hold her for the first time. And whenever they asked us if we wanted to hold her, I just kind of looked at them like I was dumb. And I was like, I looked at my husband because he had came back, and I was like, I don't know, do you want to hold her? And it was just crazy being able to hold her for the first time after 3 weeks. And I never wanted to let her go. Anytime I got the chance to hold her, I held her. And within a couple of days of her being on the wall oxygen, she got to come off of it, and she was doing great breathing on her own. It was amazing. She was still hooked up to quite a few medicines, and they did have to give her an NG tube because she was having issues with learning, because, she had to learn how to eat. She didn't get to do what normal babies do from the get-go. She didn't get to learn how to suckle and, drink from a bottle or anything. So we did have to see speech therapy while we were there to try to help her, and they helped us work with her to get her to be able to eat. She still had to end up having the NG tube because she would get tired with drinking her bottles. And when she was about 4.5 weeks old, she got to be moved down into the step down, which she went from pod H, which is one of the sickest pods in that NICU, to pod A, which is the next step to going home. And I was like, yes, we get to go home soon. But then I was thinking, I'm almost terrified and I don't want to go home because everyone here has helped me so much and I don't know what I'm doing. But they did end up helping us. They told us we were doing great. I didn't feel like it. But we did work on feeds a lot more, and she did start doing a lot better. And we actually got to start seeing her be somewhat of a normal baby, hearing her cry, listening and trying to figure out what her cries meant, whether she was hungry, whether she just wanted to be held. And while she was in pod A, they had a little TV in the room, and Allie became hooked on the TV at 4 weeks old. And just pretty much from that point, it was just trying to make sure that she could eat, keep it down, because reflux is a common thing with these kids. And she did show a little bit of signs of it, but they weren't too worried. And at 47 days. Sorry, I keep getting myself mixed up. 37 days. At 37 days, Allie got to go home with no NG tube, nothing, which was just amazing in itself. The ride home was a little rough because it had started raining and I was nervous. I was like, I have my newborn in the car. We just got out of the NICU. I'm just a nervous person. But we went home and it was just amazing having her home. And she was just so tiny in her little bassinet. But she fit into the home life really well. She was enjoying all the cuddling, all the attention. But that's when things started getting a little rough with our family and friends, because during our journey with Allie, I wasn't as knowledgeable as I am now. I did not know the correct terms for a lot of things with her. So whenever I would get updates about her on Facebook, it was basically me saying she had a rough night or she's done good today. I didn't give them every single detail, and I wish I would have. That way maybe they would have understood a little bit more exactly what she was going through, and I put that blame on me. And whenever we came home from the NICU, everybody thought that, that she's a normal baby now, everything's good, nothing bad's ever going to happen to her again, and that she's completely healthy. And they couldn't have been more wrong with our CDH kiddos. I mean, it's anything can happen at any time, and we have seen that firsthand. And I got a lot of backlash saying that I was crazy, and it's because I was a first-time mom, that I was a new mom, that I didn't know what I was talking about, and everybody else that had 3 or 4 or more kids, since they had all those kids, they knew what they were talking about. They knew more than I did. In some aspect, probably they did, but they didn't know about my child because they had healthy children. I did not give birth to a healthy child. And it just really hurt because I would get comments such as, you should be thankful that she's healthy. You should be thankful that she doesn't have any more issues and that she's not going to have any more issues. And I'm just thinking, you all have not listened to anything I have said during her journey at all whatsoever. And I mean, we lost a lot of friends after we brought her home because they just didn't understand. But I think now that I'm more with advocating for her, that some people are starting to understand a little bit more. But on with Allie's reflex story. At about 5 months old, we had to end up calling an ambulance to come and get Allie and take her to the hospital because she had woke up basically choking on her spit up. And I mean, she had actually projectile vomited and then was like choking, and it's like she was trying to swallow but she couldn't, and she was like trying to breathe but it's like she was gasping for air. And this child went from like pink to red, and it looked like she was starting to turn purple. And at the time, we were talking to the 911 operator, and it seemed like she was wanting to play 21 questions. I was like, just please get someone here. And the first people that showed up were the firefighters. There were 5 of them that came in. And I mean, I had to hand my baby off to these strangers. And it just terrified me because I was like, we haven't even been home that long. And I'm handing her off here because I don't know what to do and I don't know what's going on. And they tried to suction her out a little bit. Then EMS showed up, and the paramedic, he carried her to the ambulance. I got in there with him, and we went to the emergency room, and they ended up telling us that it was her reflex, that she had GERD. So they gave her some reflex medicine, and it really didn't help that much because throughout the day she would be fine, but at nighttime it would just start up, and we would all be up just about all night with her puking or coughing or gagging. And the only way that she could even get some relief is if we pretty much sat up holding her. And whenever I would talk about that on social media, everybody would be like, well, you're not supposed to feed her so many minutes, but like 30 minutes before bedtime, you're supposed to keep her up for at least 20 to 30 minutes after she eats. And I'm just thinking, I know this is what we've done, but this is what's happening, and we can't control it. And, I mean, we went through that for basically a full 3 years. And it was just crazy. And I felt so bad for Allie because she just was not getting any relief. And during our time being home, other than the GERD, we did have our annual appointments with Dr. Danko. She went through physical therapy for about 2 years. And then we were working with Tennessee Early Intervention System, and they had her case manager that would come out and see her once a month. She had what I call an early interventions teacher that would come out and see her twice a week. We were doing physical therapy twice a week. And Allie's, she was behind milestone-wise. That's not unusual with these kids. She did have developmental delays. And her biggest thing that she was having the main issues with was she did not tolerate tummy time. She hated being on her stomach. She could not stand it. So getting her to do tummy time and roll from her back to her tummy, she didn't start being able to really tolerate that until she's probably about 8 or 9 months old. Maybe a little older than that. And then the next thing, which I thought was actually really interesting, whenever you start falling, you have that oh no moment and you try to catch yourself. That's like a natural reflex. Allie did not have that reflex. She had to learn that. And she didn't learn it until right at the end of her physical therapy journey. So pretty much whenever Allie would start to fall, she just face planted. She didn't try to catch herself. She just couldn't do it. So she had to learn that, and it took her a while. But she finally got to where she knew how to do it. And then that's whenever they were comfortable with releasing her from physical therapy. A few months after that, we ended up doing speech therapy because by that time, Allie was still babbling. We could understand her because we were around her all the time, but no one else could. We actually taught her sign language, and we thought that would help people understand her, but then we realized that not a lot of people that we knew actually knew sign language, so she would get frustrated because no one could understand what she was doing. Oh, Lord. But before she actually started speech therapy, at 18 months old, we found out that she had a bowel obstruction, and we had actually suspected it several times between our first emergency room visit over the reflex up until she was 18 months old. We took her in and out of the doctor, in and out of the emergency room. We would tell everyone about, her CDH, her repair, everything she went through, and that she could end up having malrotation of her intestines. And everyone looked at us like we were crazy and that we were making this up. And I was just thinking to myself, I wish this was something I could make up and, not have to have gone through any of this. Well, we kept getting blown off. We were told by her pediatrician, by several ER doctors and nurses that if it was going to happen, it would have happened already. Well, 18 months old, for about 2 weeks, I had noticed that the right side of her stomach looked distended, and she kept picking at it. Like she would literally take her fingers and just pinch the skin. And at that time, she wasn't really verbal. She was just basically speaking gibberish. So she couldn't really tell us that, hey, this hurts. She could say a few things like, ow, mama, daddy, but most of it was gibberish, and anytime that she was in pain or something, she would cry, and we would just have to figure out what it was. But she wasn't crying or anything. And she was fine. She was eating normal, having bowel movements, just being normal. And that's what I thought was odd, because I've seen other families where they've talked about their child has had a bowel obstruction, and that it would be a couple days to a week that their child wouldn't eat, would be puking, couldn't keep anything down, want to have bowel movements, and they would take them to the doctor and find out they have a bowel obstruction. I just thought that Allie's was odd because she was able to do all of this. The only symptom she really had that I noticed, and once again, everybody else thought I was crazy, but that I noticed was her stomach being distended. And the day that we ended up having to take her to the emergency room, over it. We were actually at her GI doctor, and I brought it up to him. And he said, everything looks fine. Everything sounds fine. And I guess to him it did, because she was having bowel movements. She was eating. But that night I ended up going to work at my current employer. And luckily I just work peak, which is usually from like 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. or 6 p.m. to midnight. This was one of my 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Shifts. And about 9 o'clock, Kevin called me and he said, hey, Allie's been puking for the past hour. And at first I was like, that's probably her reflex, because it's a never-ending thing. But then he told me that it's just been nonstop, and it's to the point to where she is puking up brown stuff, which is, bile. And I tried to leave a little bit early. I couldn't get there. When my relief finally came at 10 o'clock, I rushed out the door. We took Allie to the emergency room at the hospital down the road from us. And this kid was to the point that she was jumping up, screaming in pain, grabbing her right side, and puke. And that was just a never-ending cycle. And we got to the emergency room, got checked in. There was only one other person that was actually sick there. And I just didn't understand why they couldn't go ahead and get her back there. And when I went to go talk to the receptionist walked away from me. That was a no-go. I was like, no, we're not doing this. So I called our other hospital we had at the time. I said, hey, what is your all's wait time? They said, well, we don't have a wait time, just bring her in, because I told them everything that went on. And we get there, they get her vials and everything. They did have to put us in a consultation room for about 2 hours, which was aggravating, but at least they actually did something. When they finally got us to a normal room, by that time we were all covered in puke, and Allie was just exhausted. And Allie used to have that term white coat syndrome. Anytime she would see a nurse or doctor, she would freak out. Except for Dr. Danko, she was always fine with her. But with any other doctor or nurse, it didn't matter if it was casual Friday and they were wearing their normal civilian clothes, or if they actually had their white coat and scrubs on. She knew who you were. She knew what you were. She didn't like you. That was all there is to it. So she would scream, cry, pitch a fit. So whenever they came in there to give her an IV, because they were afraid of her becoming dehydrated, this child didn't move. She didn't flinch. She didn't look their way. Didn't make a sound. Nothing. And I knew that for sure something was wrong. And I was scared to death that I was going to lose my child, because it just seemed like that she just fought whatever this was, though we wasn't for sure for so long already, and that she was just giving up. But while we were there, they did run some x-rays and ultrasounds, and our technology here isn't as advanced as other cities. And before we had even left, because they ended up transferring us to the East Tennessee Children's Hospital, and they had already told us that they had suspected a bowel obstruction. And this also, we explained everything to them of her birth defect and everything she went through. And it was just nice that for once we actually had some doctors and nurses that were listening to us. That wasn't something that we were used to. And they said, like I said, they thought she had a bowel obstruction, so we got transferred to East Tennessee Children's Hospital, and the doctor that was over her, I can't remember his name, and it's probably not a good thing. Long story short, we were there for about 4 weeks, and the doctor that was over her kept saying that her bowel was overlapped. It was not overlapped. Also, when we got there, he had told me that he had informed Dr. Danko that Allie was there and what was going on. I was like, okay. Well, they ended up doing some procedures on her where they had stuck an enema up in her attached to a bag of saline solution. They would squeeze it up there. This kid would scream and cry in pain. And they did it 3 times, and they wanted to do it a 4th time. And I was like, no. I was like, you have to stop. I was like, this isn't working. And at the time, they also had a tube that was going up her nose and down into her stomach to keep her suction out. If she couldn't drink, she couldn't eat, she couldn't keep anything down. Even if she didn't have anything, she was still puking. And after they did that, which it just felt like they tortured her, and it tore my nerves all to pieces, I started thinking about how I hadn't heard anything from Dr. Danko, because anytime, literally, we would take Allie to the emergency room, she would know about it. She would call and she would just say, hey, what's going on? I was just thinking, I haven't heard from her. So I decided to call her office. I talked to the receptionist, told her what was going on. And she said, honey, we haven't heard anything from that hospital. They haven't sent us anything. I got quiet for a second because I started becoming mad. Because I had just, found out that I'd been lied to. I was like, okay. She's like, Dr. Danko's with the patient right now. I'll have her call you back whenever she's done. It was about 10 minutes later, Dr. Danko called me. She confirmed she hadn't heard anything, didn't know Allie's in the hospital at the time, nothing. So I told her everything that was going on with Allie. She immediately said she has a bowel obstruction. She needs surgery now. So by that time, I was furious. So I told her, I was like, okay. I said, we'll probably see you in a few hours. Get off the phone with her. Allie starts crying. I pick her up, try to calm her down. A few minutes later, the doctor who was over her comes in with a few nurses. And all I can say is I went complete mama bear on him. I put my foot down and I confronted him. Told him what Dr. Danko said. I said, either you do surgery now or you're transferring us to Vanderbilt. And by the time I got done ranting and raving, Allie puked all over me and he said, okay, we'll go ahead and do surgery now. I said, okay, that might be a good idea. So here I was, once again by myself, sitting in a waiting room, waiting to hear about how my child was doing. Because we still wasn't completely for sure if it was a bowel obstruction, but it did turn out to be a bowel obstruction. And Dr. Angel was the one who performed her surgery, which he was amazing. And he had told us that she did have malrotation of the intestines and that whenever it happened, the scar tissue from her diaphragm surgery was just wrapped all around her intestines. And we were actually lucky that it didn't end up basically killing off some of her intestines like that. So she got lucky on that part. And also he did us a favor and went ahead and took out her appendix because he was explaining to us that how he was having to put everything back, that he was going to have to end up putting it on the left side. And with everything we've already been through with no one listening to us and thinking that we're crazy, he said, I just went ahead and took it out. I was like, thank you, because that saved us a lot of explaining to do in the future. So Allie ended up going to the pediatric intensive care unit after her surgery. She was there for 3 days. She also received a blood transfusion, which was her 4th one. And that was actually the first one I got to see them do from start to finish. And even though I've donated blood before, it made me feel a little queasy. But that was a interesting time to see that, and then trying to get Allie to not pick at her new incision because she didn't understand, what was going on. And after that 3 days, she got to move a step down, and she enjoyed going and playing in the little kids' room. And they also, during the surgery, they had to put a PICC line in her leg. Just like she had a PICC line in her arm when she was in the NICU. That was probably like that long. The one that they had in her leg when they came to take it out whenever she got discharged, I swear was a mile long, and I seen them take that out, and I about faded. I'm just thinking, how? I really did. I'm pretty sure I turned white as a ghost. And I was just like, oh my Lord. How was that in my child? But after that, she got to go home. She was still seeing her GI doctor too. We had started actually seeing a GI doctor when she was a year old because she was diagnosed with failure to thrive. And this incident ended up making things worse because she was already skinny as it was, and she almost looked like basically a bag of bones by the time we got home. I mean, she just looked like she lost so much weight. She just looked pitiful. So we were continuing with doing that, and he found out about everything she went through, and he was like, well, I'm glad Dr. Angel was the one who did it because, he's amazing. He was. But Dr. Angel did also tell us that with this already happening once, that it's going to happen again. He said it could be 6 months from now, 6 years, or until, in her adulthood. So that's something we were constantly on the lookout for. And from a GI point of view, she actually quit seeing her GI doctor when she was a little over 4. And she's been doing well since then. And like I had mentioned earlier, she started speech therapy right around the time she was 2. I'm sorry. It's probably a little few months after she was 2. And this is where we can start getting to the funny parts of her journey during her speech therapy. During the first appointment, I went in there with her, and the speech therapist, just kind of looked at her, monitored her, and by the end of the session, she was like, yeah, she needs some speech therapy, so we were going 2 times a week. And for the first month, Allie would come out of the door, and she would just start, babbling to me all her gibber jabberish. I didn't think anything of it. Well, after a month went by, Allie came out to the waiting room, and she was just talking her gibberish to me. And her speech therapist looked at me. She said, "That's the only time I've heard her talk." She said, "This whole month, this child will not say a word to me." And I just thought that was crazy. Because Allie, even whenever she couldn't really talk, she was all the time just going on and on, just doing her own little talking. And for her to actually be quiet is scary. But after that month, Allie started getting used to her. She actually started talking a lot better. She was in speech therapy for about a year. And ever since the bowel obstruction, she's been okay for the most part. She does still get sick quite easy. She's actually had RSV once. And during preschool, she was sick pretty much the whole entire time they were there until COVID happened. And for the most part, she's doing well, but it's just the fact that we always have to worry. And as I was saying with the bowel obstruction, after that happened, that's whenever I really put my foot down and started advocating for her. Because at first I had kind of died down with not really trying to get her birth defect out there, because I had the so-called friends who told me that I shouldn't be using my daughter like I am and throwing a pity party. And then after the bowel obstruction happened, I just became furious with everything. And I was like, you know what? I was like, people need to know. I was like, she deserves better than this. There's kids like her out there. Like, I'm not going to stop advocating for her. I'm going to be her voice until she can be her own voice. And if everybody just wants to flat out ignore me, go right ahead. I mean, that's fine. But I'm still going to be doing what I'm doing. That is why I'm doing what I'm doing now, why I volunteer for CDH Internationals. That way I can raise awareness for my daughter. I can raise awareness for other people's kids. Because in the end, it seems like the CDH community is all that we have together. Like, we have family who don't understand us, friends who don't understand, and they just always want to try to put us down sometimes. And there's just no sense in that. So really, in the CDH community, we're just about all that we have. We are a family. We've all been through this. And we just really do need to come together a lot better. We need to make our babies' voices be heard. Because no one else is going to do it. We have to do it. They need us. And we have to do better for our babies. We need to try to raise as much funds as we can. That way we can help other CDH families. That way we can help with research, so we can try to figure out 100% for sure what is causing this and how we can stop it. Because no other family should have to go through this. But I want to thank you all for listening to me. And just please help us with raising funds, sharing everyone's stories, sharing your stories, spreading awareness. We want to be like the little who and Horton hears a who, all of us can end up yelling until we're blue in the face. And hopefully, eventually, one day, we will have that one person who comes in with a yawp and just blows the whole entire, atmosphere away, makes a hole in that cloud that we seem to be stuck in, and get it out to the world that we are here, our kids are here, they need help. Thank you.